Mr. Daniel Steinman, there is a term that is called debt servicing. There might be someone out there that doesn't understand what it means. So can you, before we get into detail, but can you just give us a short elaboration on what debt servicing is?
Elsaby, it's the amount of money that the government has to pay to its investors in the form of interest. So if you go to the bank and you tell them, I want to buy a car, it's $150,000, please give me a loan. They say, okay, you put down 10% deposit, it's $15,000. We loan you $135,000, and these are the terms and the conditions, and this is the maturity period, amortization period. This is how long you will pay back this loan. Every month that you make a payment, a part of this is what we call capital. You bring the outstanding amount down, but the other almost half of your monthly payment is interest, the interest on your loan. So debt servicing is the amount of interest that the government has to pay to investors for the privilege of the capital market, of being able to sell government debt in the capital market. Now, the big thing about debt servicing and why it is so important as one of the thresholds in the national budget is that the conventional wisdom is that you go borrow money, whether you're a company or a household or a government, you go borrow money to invest in something to enable you to grow.
Yeah.
The whole rationale is that you must be in a position after you've borrowed that money to increase your turnover if you're a company. Now, what is the turnover of the economy? The turnover of the economy is GDP.
Yeah.
So if your debt is the same amount as that what you invest in new infrastructure, it is a very clear signal that you have a very negative debt overhang. Let me phrase this differently to make it simpler. Because I want to use the Namibian budget as the example.
Yeah.
The government in the budget every year, we pay slightly more than 14% of total expenditure goes to debt servicing. Very simply put, that is the interest that we pay on government debt. In the last budget, after the increase of a couple of percentage points on capital spending is investment. Schools, the buildings, hospitals, the buildings, roads, harbour, airports, everything that enables us to grow the rest of the economy. That is capital spending. So it's the investment in the budget. And here's the kicker. Guess what is the amount of total expenditure that goes into infrastructure? 14%.
Yeah.
So do you see that correlation? So when somebody points this out to you, it actually becomes very clear. We can only afford to spend 14% of our total expenditure. Everything that we're going to spend in the next year, only 14% is going to build the country.
Yeah.
The rest is consumption. It's like retail. It's going to the supermarket and buying chocolates instead of going to Megabuild and buying bricks so that you can build something.
More, yeah.
So if the investment in infrastructure is 14% of total expenditure and the interest that we pay on our debt is also 14% or slightly more than 14% of total expenditure, it shows just what damage the debt is doing, and that debt should be much, much smaller, so that money that we are now paying in interest on foreigners, not for local people, can actually
be invested
become
back
part
into the
of
country,
the capital side of the budget and be invested in schools and hospitals, and not in the teachers and the doctors,
salaries,
the physical structures that we need to be able to operate. So there's a very big argument that you can. It's not an irrelevant argument. Why must some children in rural areas still go to school under a so-called boom school?
Yeah.
When we could actually build them a small school classroom and school infrastructure if we did not spend the money on paying interest on our debt. So this in the next budget is something that I will be watching very keenly, because the promise that was made last year is that slowly, gradually, we will turn that ratio around. That the interest payments will come down, so that our first target is to reach that 10% of total expenditure, which is an IMF benchmark. And 4% to 10% doesn't sound so far, but let me tell you, in terms of budget finances, it's very far. And then on the opposite side of the coin, that the capital expenditure, in other words, the investment in infrastructure, that we slowly grow that from 14 to 15 to 16, so that the interest payments come down and the capital budget grows. This is the whole thing. This is the difficult thing in our budget. And you will not achieve it in 1 year. But every year we want to see incrementally that the ratios are changing. And that we are moving to more positive territory in terms of investment.
And hopefully it will happen, say, in the next 5 years so. Hoping that the new administration will do that for us. But we unfortunately have come to the end of this talk. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back again next week. So from me, Elsa B. Tibinyani, and Mr. Daniel Steinman, we say goodbye.